All right. Hi, humans. Hi, Haley. This one is going out to you. Of course, anyone can watch this. So, standard 3.8, Haley asked for some clarification on. So, the standard for 3.8 explain how the process of diffusion results in changes to the cultural landscape, such as acculturation, assimilation, syncretism, and multiculturalism. So, I thought it would be best. This standard's pretty loaded with no terms. So, I thought let's just break down those no terms and then kind of piece it back together. So, the National Park Service defines cultural landscape as a geographic area including both cultural and natural resources and the wildlife or domestic animals therein associated with a historic event, activity, or person, or exhibiting other cultural or aesthetic values. Simply put, guys, the cultural landscape is literally anywhere on earth can be a cultural landscape, which I know seems confusing, but it's the idea that there is something significant to that place and you can identify it. When you see it, you know what it is, or you can feel something special about it. So this picture here on the left here, this is a classic Shinto tower. Temple, excuse me, and this is in Japan. So Shintoism is a religious belief unique to Japan, and it really is very indicative that you can tell Shintoism is practiced there. In fact, in downtown Colorado Springs, there's a Shinto temple in the middle of the median by Palmer High School, which was actually a gift to Colorado Springs from its Japanese sister city. So there you go. This one over here, this should look a little familiar to you guys. This is the skyline of Denver, Colorado. And again, this is a very unique cultural landscape. People who are familiar with Denver usually immediately recognize the mountain backdrop. Again, not all huge cities, have that beautiful backdrop. Um, Denver is unique. We have this very unique building right here. This is called the cash register building. And if you look at it from its profile, it kind of looks like an old school cash register. So again, cultural landscape is just a place that you can almost immediately identify where it is in the world. So the standard is basically asking, how do we see changes to the cultural landscape through different processes? So we remember diffusion is simply the spread of people, things, ideas, culture practices. It can also be through disease, tech, weather, and other factors. So I liked this little guy over here. An example of cultural diffusion is the popularity of the English language, which is foreign to many. So again, we know English is widely spoken around the world, and it clearly had to diffuse to other countries through trade or conquest or whatnot. I thought this was kind of cool. This is the top messenger apps used around the world as of December 2019, January 2020. And so you can see here, it is through stuff like social media that we can clearly, keep diffusing. We can keep sharing and changing ideas. So we see the blue Facebook Messenger is very popular in North America, Australia, parts of North Africa, parts of Europe. WhatsApp, that is interesting. So that is this green one, and you can see the vast majority of the world is using that WhatsApp. I actually use it as well. My good friend that is teaching in Saudi Arabia, which is this country right here in the green, she uses WhatsApp because it's accessible. Many countries have some, like firewalls in place to control and limit maybe some of the information or websites that they can access. So WhatsApp has been accepted by many of these countries as an acceptable tool. So I use WhatsApp when I talk to my friend that lives in Saudi Arabia. All right. The first way that we see the changes to the cultural landscape is probably the most like severe way we see this, and it is through the process of acculturation. So acculturation is assimilation or basically taking on a different culture, typically the dominant one, and there usually results in a complete loss of the original culture. So a classic example in North America would have been the erasure of Native American peoples and converting them into a more like Western white way of life. So this picture here on the left, this is a kind of an infamous picture of a Native American who, on the left, obviously his picture when he was first encountered, and then he was sent to what they would call a boarding school, and those boarding schools main purposes was to basically teach the Indian out of them and turn them more Western. And so you can see the result. And this is acculturation at its most severe that he almost doesn't even look like himself anymore. This picture, again, another one from one of those Native American or Indian boarding schools. And again, lots to unpack here. So they're wearing very Western clothes, that you don't see anything that would be uniquely Native American. And then, very dominant message of looking unto Jesus. For Native American people, Jesus was not a figure. That is a Christian belief. And for Native Americans who had never been raised or taught Christian beliefs, this is a huge way to obviously kind of force that to them and force them to change. All right, so assimilation is kind of like a lighter version of acculturation. It's when a person's or a group's language or culture starts to resemble those of another group, but they still get to retain some of their own cultural identity. So through like acculturation, it's often forced. You either convert or we kill you. Assimilation is the idea that you keep the things that are still important to you, but you certainly adapt to a new culture as well. So it's a little bit of both. So I thought this picture was interesting. We have some, traditional Muslim women, and but they are participating in, a very modern activity, if you will. They're at a playground. You can see she's got her laptop here. So again, that idea that they're still very much keeping their own culture, but they're also bringing in new culture. Um, this one over here, Orchestra de Luz. This is a family favorite in my family. This is actually a Japanese salsa band. So yes, you heard that correct. They are a Japanese salsa band. So they sing and in Spanish. They play salsa music, but they are in Japan. And again, talk about a completely mushing of two different cultures that they've brought in together. Okay, syncretism is when we combine the combination of different forms of belief or practice. So again, this is similar to assimilation, where you're going to have a little bit of both going on at the same time. Syncretism is the way that you figure out how both of them can kind of exist simultaneously. So again, classic image over here of McDonald's, and just how it is. We know McDonald's is all over the world. Many local, or excuse me, many international McDonald's have like a regional menu. So they'll have different things on their menu depending on the part of the world. Even in the United States, depending on the region you're in, you often see the regional offerings. I love going to McDonald's in New Mexico and even in El Paso, Texas, where I'm from, because you can always get green chili as an option. And that's just an important regional flavor. I thought this was so interesting over here because I actually stumbled upon this right at the beginning of quarantine. In fact, we got a new oven, and I was reading through the instruction manual, and it had this thing called Sabbath mode. And I was like, what on earth is Sabbath mode? So the Sabbath is the holy days in the predominantly in the Jewish faith, and there are very strict rules around what can be done on the Sabbath. The Sabbath is supposed to be a day of complete rest. There's supposed to be no use of electronics and whatnot. So you can imagine being a modern family who practices Judaism, how you can function on the Sabbath without using electricity or technology in today's world. So our oven is a new oven. It's a brand new oven, and it has this thing called Sabbath mode. And what it does is it allows your oven to comply with Jewish law for use on the Sabbath and holy days. So basically, what it does is it turns off everything. Like, it will turn off the light in your oven. It only allows you to use like a couple of the buttons on there. And what happens is the day before the Sabbath, you're basically supposed to turn it on, and then it will keep your oven heated the entire time into the Sabbath mode. And so what that means is it's not actually being turned on to be used on the day of the Sabbath, but instead it's just basically staying warm from the day before. So you have to plan ahead if you are going to be cooking a meal, and you have to know if you're following the Sabbath, that you turn it on the day before. So syncretism is that's a really interesting idea of how modern technology and ancient tradition have come together. All right, and then multiculturalism. This is the presence or support of several distinct culture or ethnic groups in a society. We know the United States, kind of the thing that we are known for is being a huge multicultural country. People from all over the world come to live here, and because of the freedoms that we are granted as Americans, they are allowed to practice. many of their culture, practices freely without fear of persecution. We've seen, unfortunately, in other parts of the world, through the acts of genocide, the Holocaust, that obviously, depending on where you were, depending on the time, you weren't allowed to have your own cultural practices. But here in the United States, we embrace that, we celebrate that. So I like this little cartoon over here. I just thought it was cute. So multiculturalism, all cultures coexist, and then assimilation is that idea again that you start to take on that dominant culture, and then acculturation is full blown. You've lost your own. And then again, I just thought this picture was really kind of spoke to it all. So this is a swearing in for American immigrants. And so these are people you can see just in this snapshot, all the different multiculturalism we have of people that are, coming to become American citizens. So simply put, going back to what the standard is asking, as culture traits diffuse throughout the world via migration, social media, etc., changes to the original cultural landscape are seen. Whether it's the introduction of new languages, the presence of fast food chains, or a popular song, cultural landscape begins to change. So I left with this again, going back to McDonald's. I have a couple of friends that actually live in Australia, and they said it's been a really interesting thing because McDonald's is such an American institution, and it is becoming extremely popular in Australia. In fact, the Australians call it macas. And here is a picture that I found. I thought this was really kind of just says it all. You have the McDonald's sign, you have the place, you know that the cafe drive-through is open, and then you have the Australian flag, and then not too far underneath it is that golden arches flag flying. So again, this idea that if it wasn't for diffusion, if it wasn't for migration, if it wasn't for globalization, that McDonald's would not have made it to Australia. But now that it has made it to Australia, it's starting to change that culture landscape. That can be good and bad, right? It's good to have globalization. It's good to have connection, but at the cost of what? Are we eroding away? You know, other culture practices that are just getting kind of swept under the rug. Um, more and more people are starting to speak common languages, great for communication, but are we losing something else when those other languages go dormant? So things to think about. All right. I hope that helps. And yeah, you guys are awesome. We'll talk to you later. Bye.